Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be doing three teachings this weekend, tonight, tomorrow morning, and the following morning. That's Brisbane time. Tonight we're going to be talking about very short, it's only 4 lines, Dzogchen Pith instruction from Princess Barani. This Pith instruction she gave when asked to give a concise teaching that summed up the entire Dzogchen tradition. Now, at that time, around 650 CE, the entire Dzogchen tradition is what we now call Dzogchen Semde. The other traditions, the Long Day and the Menag Day, the Space series and the Pith instruction series, they come centuries later. The Long Day, a couple hundred years later, and the Menag Day, many, many centuries later. And so they are actually quite distinctly different because the other difference between them is that the Semde arises in Odiyana, which centered around the Swat Valley in western Pakistan in the Himalayan foothills. However, the Long Day and the Menag Day, they're really much Tibetan. So there's a considerable difference there in approach, style, etc., which we'll talk about a little bit. So the Pith instruction I'm going to discuss doesn't have a name. It's just 4 lines from Princess Barani. So just be alerted that there are a number of female lineage holders in the Semde lineage who have similar names. There's Princess Barani, Metsoma Parani, and there's a couple of others. So, but their stories are very different. So when you if you want to do some research and Google Princess Barani, you won't find a lot. There's not a lot surviving about the early lineage holders of the Dzogchen Semde. But you will probably find sources that confuse Princess Barani and Metsongma Parani. I've seen that quite often. So, but we're talking about Princess Barani, who was the mother of Prahavajra, who was the first human to practice and teach Dzogchen. In Tibet, he's called Garab Dorje, which is just what the Tibetans call him. His actual name is Prahavajra. So Princess Barani was the 3rd holder of the Dzogchen Semde lineage and received the entirety of the Dzogchen Semde teachings from Prahavajra himself. Remember, at that time, to say the entirety of the Semde teachings, it means the entirety of the Dzogchen teachings. There wasn't anything else at that time. So Princess Barani was a daughter of the king of Odiyana and the mother of Prahavajra, or Garab Dorje, and she began having visions that she would have a child well before Prahavajra was actually born. So she starts having these visions saying that she's going to have a child, which was perplexing to her because she was a virgin. So that posed a problem. After the baby was born, she hid him in a cinder pit. So cinder pits are where they make charcoal, unpleasant places, as she believed people would think badly of her for having a child without a father in the picture, and because she was a virgin and couldn't explain what had happened. Some of the texts say that she became a nun or was a nun when she fell pregnant, but that is not common to all of the biographies of her. Again, there's possibly some confusion around this Barani, Parani, Sarani names that are all there. There was a nun, Parani. So we're not sure if she became a nun or not. We do know that she was a princess and she became pregnant without a father. We also know that she was a guru to a number of other lineage holders in the Semde tradition, and so she was pivotal to the spread of Dzogchen outside of Odiyana. So without her, Dzogchen would not have left Odiyana. It would never have gone to the rest of northern India, and it would certainly would never have gone to Tibet. So direct students of hers were the teachers of Sri Singha, who was the teacher of Padmasambhava and Verachana, who took Dzogchen to Tibet. So that's a little bit about her. So just at this point, I'll just say, generally speaking, I don't prepare when I'm teaching. I just teach off the cuff, off the top of my head, as you say. But this time I'm kind of doing a lecture. And the reason for that is, there are 2 reasons. Number one, although this is only 4 lines, it's very important. And it sums up the entire Dzogchen Semde tradition, which, of course, at that time is the entire Dzogchen tradition. And it is very much what we in our Sangha do. It's very much what we're focused on. So the other thing I'd like to say about the Semde is that you might hear Tibetan lamas say that the Monag day is superior to the Semde, or even that the long day is superior to the Semde. This is because the practice instructions for the Semde have always been oral from teacher to student. And as a result of, I don't know if you know the history of Tibet, but there was a period in time where there was a king, Langdama, who hated Dharma, and he basically erased Dharma from Tibet. During that time, there was a bit of a break in the lineage. And so it was believed that the practices from the Semde were lost, that it was really just some texts that were about the view. But thankfully for us, that's actually not true, although many Tibetan lamas will tell you that's the case. Even my own lama, Rinpoche, said that, he didn't really say that, but he said that in the Monagda there was more opportunity for luminosity. This is because, not because Semde teachings aren't about luminosity, they very much are. It's because the practice lineage had been lost in Tibet. So, but luckily, the teachings went south from Odhyana as well as north to Tibet. So they went south to Andhra Pradesh, which is where Sri Singha actually had his base, in the south of Tibet. So there's a lineage that arises there that kept these teachings intact. And we are very lucky in that Khyabje Togden Amtrun, who is one of our primary gurus, he and Dudra Rinpoche are primary gurus, he revitalized this and taught these things to Jamyang, the practices, that is, and that's the foundation of who we are as a Sangha, those teachings that come from Khyabje Dudra Rinpoche that reinitiate or revive or reinstate the practice instructions from the Semde. All right, now I'm going to read the Pith instruction a couple of times. As I said, this is sort of a lecture, so there'll be a lot of information, and the things that I would like you to absorb, I will repeat. So bear with me. The other thing is that in the Semde, there's no long or reading transmission. So the transmission comes in the form of the R, so that transmission is given for everything, really. So I'll do that at the end. But there's no, also because it has been translated from the language of Odhyana into Tibetan, but the original form, the language of Odhyana, is lost. So we only have the Tibetan left, but that's kind of irrelevant because in the Semde, there's no transmissions and no empowerments. Okay, so the Pith instruction is this. This is from Princess Barani, when she was asked to sum up the entire Dzogchen tradition. Joyfully delight in the uninterrupted vision of the objects of the six senses. Whatever you enjoy, Bodhi will blaze more and more. When one has obtained the power of supreme presence and become familiar with it, meditating means leaving the six sense consciousnesses free and relaxed. So I'll just read it again. Joyfully delight in the uninterrupted vision of the objects of the six senses. Whatever you enjoy, Bodhi will blaze more and more. When one has obtained the power of supreme presence and become familiar with it, meditating means leaving the six sense consciousnesses free and relaxed. So that comes from the Nyingma Karma, which is the canon of Nyingma or ancient teachings. And it also has been translated by a number of lamas. Chogyal Lampa Norbu Rinpoche, probably the most famous one, and he's the person from whom I received these teachings. All right, into the commentary. So as you can see this, it's very short, 4 lines. So this Pith instruction places joy at the heart of the Dzogchen Semde tradition and gives instruction on how to practice, how to abide in our natural condition, or Rigpa. And I'll unpack the practice, like how you actually do that practice a little later. But first, it's important to understand that this focus on joy in Dzogchen originates with the teaching of the Buddha. So remember this is what Princess Barani said to summarize the entire Dzogchen tradition. And she places joy right up front. Okay? So it's really important to understand that that is not a departure from Sutrayana at all. It is perfectly in alignment with that. So it's really important to understand that focus on joy in Dzogchen originates with the teachings of the Buddha. After the Buddha had learned meditation from his two main teachers, Udaka Ramaputta and Alara Kalama, and found that both form and formless meditation did not lead to liberation. So that's all kinds of meditation can be categorized as either form or formless. So none of them worked. He then underwent harsh ascetic practices or yoga. So he did yogas, all the yogas, things that in Tibetan we call Salung, Chulko, etc., Najang, etc. He did all that. And he found that they also were not effective. And the Buddha then, when he was reflecting on where he was at, he recalled a meditative state he'd entered spontaneously as a child. And the Buddha recounts this in the Mahasasaka Sutra. It's a bit of a tongue twister. And the Buddha says in that sutra, this is one of the early sutras. So in terms of like veracity or authenticity, the early sutras are where it's at. The later Pali sutras, we start to think these are written down, so like the Vinaya, these are written down some 500 years at least after the Buddha passed away. And then there's the Mahayana sutras, which are not in Pali, but in Sanskrit, and they're written at least 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away, and they actually do arise oftentimes from visions of practitioners like Nagarjuna, such as the Heart Sutra. A lot of people think the Heart Sutra, I don't know what they think about that, but it was a vision that arose, and it's described that Nagarjuna rediscovered it. But it's written 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away. And it's written in Sanskrit, which was not the language of the Buddha and not the language of the early sutras. All right, and then we have the Vajrayana, which comes later. All right, so the Buddha said, I recall once when my father the Sakyan was working and I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree. Then, quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful mental qualities, I entered and remained in the first yana, rapture and pleasure born from solitude, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. Could that be the path to awakening? Then following on that memory came the realization, so this is what the Buddha is saying, that is the path to awakening. So here, quite clearly, the Buddha is indicating that the first step to true enlightenment starts with rapture or joy. Now, the reason the word rapture is there is because the word for joy that we're using here is not the same word that we're using for joy when we're talking about the four immeasurables. It is when we talk about the four immeasurables, but the traditional Mahayana discussion of the four immeasurables, they don't use the word for physical embodied joy, which is what the Buddha is referring to here. This is a word priti, which means physical embodied joy, not cognitive. You're not thinking anything. Whereas appreciative joy, which is one of the four immeasurables, is more a cognitive thing. This is a felt experience the Buddha's talking about here. Now, he notes that it's the first jhana. This is quite profound. And he's saying that there is also, in this first jhana, still some directed thought. So the ego is still thinking stuff, and some evaluation, some judgment about what is good and what is bad. So in this first jhana, you're not awake, you're not enlightened, and it's not thought-free, right? But it's a very profound starting point. And he said quite clearly this joy that he's talking about, this embodied feeling of joy, experience of joy, comes from being alone in nature. That's where it comes from. Okay, so here quite clearly the Buddha is indicating that the first step to true enlightenment starts with rapture or joy found in nature. Rest is a really important component of what the Buddha was doing there when that happened. Relaxation and solitude. And by solitude here, we're not talking about going off for decades all by yourself. This is essentially a lunch break that the Buddha's having here. His father was working, so he went out, hung out under some trees, felt cool, quiet, and relaxed, and then joy arose and his mind entered into the first jhana. Okay? Which is not a state free of thought or a state without any kind of evaluation. It's still dualistic, but it's still very important because it's the first jhana. Right? But when we're talking about solitude, we're not talking about, going away to the mountains and being purely isolated. It just means a moment of quiet alone. Okay? So according to the Buddha, simple natural joy is the foundation of the path, if not the whole path to awakening. And when Jamyang received teachings on these things from Kyabje Dzogchen Amtrun said, it's the whole path. It is the whole path. So, and that's kind of like what Princess Barani is saying as well. It's everything. So, all the other meditations and practices taught in the various traditions from Theravada to Mahayana to Dzogchen, in our humble opinion, must be based on a foundation of simple, restful joy and solitude. Otherwise, they don't really work. The Buddha is saying, this is where we start. Again, I'll repeat what I'm always repeating. Those of you who know me, I'm repeating this all the time. There's these things called the 7 factors of awakening. They're essential to awakening. On that list is joy, pretty, embodied, feeling of joy, not some kind of cognitive appreciation of others' successes, but feeling actually embodied joy, and what's called passaddhi or relaxation, being relaxed. These are essential to awakening. And Dzogchen really takes that and runs with it. All right, so should be pretty clear now that joy is at the heart of Dzogchen Semde. In the Dzogchen Semde tradition, our Lord Buddha is often given the honorific title, the Joyful One. So in other traditions, they call him the Awakened One, Supreme One, etc., etc. In the Semde tradition, he's referred to as the Joyful One. And the path of Dzogchen Semde, so the path itself, which is characterized by 2 main practices, sky gazing and devotion, is often described as the mother of all joyful ones, meaning that way, sky gazing and devotion, is the way that all Buddhas awaken. And when we say sky gazing, that's a joy practice, okay, as is devotion. So that specific phrasing used by Manjushri Mitra, if anyone know anything about Dzogchen, Manjushri Mitra is very important. Paravajra, when he was a boy, debated Manjushri Mitra and defeated him in a debate. And then Manjushri Mitra immediately became essentially the first student of Paravajra, Garab Dorje. And he's very important in terms of the transmission of the teachings. He wrote a text called Refining Ore into Gold, which sort of summarizes the teachings he received from Paravajra. So that's also a key Semde text. And this phrase, the joyful one and the mother of all joyful ones, referring to the path, it's found in lots of Pith instructions by many of the Semde masters. So likewise, pure and total presence, what we might call Rigpa, okay, the uncontrived natural condition, so our natural state, if you want to use that word state, which is realization itself, is described by Manjushri Mitra as synonymous with. So synonymous with, non-dual with is another way of saying that, pure delight or joy. So Rigpa, according to Manjushri Mitra, is non-dual with pure delight and joy. So our true nature is non-dual with pure delight and joy. Okay? Then there is the simple fact that Prahavajra's name in Tibetan, Garab Dorje, translates as supreme indestructible joy. So we couldn't have joy appear more in the names and the ways that we describe the Dzogchen Semde tradition. So Garab Dorje, so Gar comes from Gar, which is joy, and Dorje is Vajra or indestructible, and the Rub part means supreme. So Garab Dorje literally means supreme indestructible joy, okay? Which Manjushri Mitra has already said, that's Rigpa. That's the true nature of mind, okay? So it's also really important to understand that joy is not one of the ordinary sense pleasures described as a hindrance in the sutra tradition, in the sutras. So quite often, not me, because I don't know, I seem not to get this kind of comment, but people practicing the Semde tradition often get told, oh, joy is just a sense pleasure, it's a hindrance. you know. But that is not the case. In the Mahasasaka Sutra, MN 36 is the actual verse, the Buddha reflects on his initial misperception of joy. So the Buddha admits he misperceived joy when he was doing form and formless meditation and then doing all the ascetic yogas. He misunderstood the nature of joy, or particularly this embodied somatic felt experience of joy as a hindrance. He misinterpreted it, he misunderstood. And then he says that he really made a mistake, and he then places joy as central to the path to enlightenment in that sutra, which is one of the early sutras. Now, also in the sutra that brings together the contemplations of all the Buddhas, quite a mouthful, this is made very clear. It says, our joy is not corrupt, so it's not a hindrance. We have no regrets. What does that mean? It means we're not looking into the past. Joy dissolves past, present, and future. We are totally perfect. This is about the Semde tradition of seeing, of focusing on our fundamental nature, which is primordially perfect. For emptiness has no self, which means, the self, of course, is imperfect, but that's just a fabrication, a delusion, an illusion. Beyond that, what we really are, our natural condition, it's perfect. When our uncorrupted thusness is completely perfected, which means when we discover who we really are, to be uncontrived is actually the way that it is. And by uncontrived, they mean what? They mean not applying effort, concentration, striving, etc. It just means to be natural as you are. So that part of the lecture was really just about setting up why we're talking about joy all the time, why joy is so important to the Dzogchen tradition, particularly the Semde. The other traditions move away from this and they start to import Mahayana ideas and Vajrayana ideas into the Long Day and the Monad Day, mostly after Longchenpa, because he creates this graded idea that you have these 9 vehicles that you've got to move through before you, and then the last one obviously is Dzogchen, and much of that is tantric, But actually in the Semde teachings, they say really clearly, we're not interested in Tantra. Don't use mantra, don't use visualizations, don't pray to deities, don't, etc., etc. I mean, if you've read any of my work, there's an article online called The 10 Absences. Go there, have a look. I'm not going to talk about it too much in this lecture because it's just, it's a whole other topic. But essentially the Semde says we're separate and different from Tantra. We're not including Tantra in what we do. Vajrayana, essentially, what we call Vajrayana is Tantric Buddhism. So now in that commentary that we just encountered, which I'll reread now that I've given you the background, there are some key points that I'm going to hit, and they are, they're not, you don't need to remember these or anything, but this is just a way to kind of like, there's kind of like a little pointers to give you a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about joy. Joy is not just joy. Joy is not ordinary pleasure. Joy always wants to be shared. Joy is universal. Joy has an exponentially expanding nature, and joy is effortless. So these are the sort of key points that I'll hit when I'm doing a line-by-line commentary of Princess Barani's Pith instruction. I'll just read you the Pith instruction again so that we can really kind of get it in our heads. Joyfully delight in the uninterrupted vision of the objects of the 6 senses. Whatever you enjoy, Bodhi will blaze more and more. When one has obtained the power of supreme presence and become familiar with it, meditating means leaving the 6 sense consciousnesses free and relaxed. All right, so first line, joyfully delight in the uninterrupted vision of the objects of the 6 senses. There's a lot there. So this is a practice instruction, obviously, but without a teacher, the practice instruction is not obvious, that lays the foundation for Dzogchen meditation. So this is like saying, essentially, this is what you need to do to meditate in terms of Dzogchen. So what exactly does it mean? It's referring to this guy. So remember, this Dzogchen Semde has 2 practices, 2 only. Sky gazing, devotion. So it's referring to sky gazing, which is a joy practice. And, joy practice, sky gazing, devotion in the Semde, they're kind of one and the same thing. Excuse me. The vision of the object of the six senses, so that word vision there, is referring to our perception of reality. Okay? So it's saying joyfully delight in the uninterrupted vision, our uninterrupted perception of reality. Right? That word could have also been translated as appearances, display, or illusion. So the instruction is saying to delight in the display or appearance of the six senses, which is the fabricated world or sense construct, even though we know it is all an illusion. And we'll talk about how to do that a little later, give you some practice instructions. So it's saying joyfully delight in this mirage, in this illusion produced by the senses. So the word vision is also a subtle allusion to what arises through this practice, which is experience of bindus, spheres, and rainbows. Now, the minute we start talking about bindus, spheres, and rainbows, the word tögyel comes up. Now, that is not a word used in the Semde tradition, really. Nowadays, you might find people talking about it in the context of Semde teachings because it's so familiar, but it does not appear in the Semde teachings originally. It's part of the Menagde tradition, so it's much later. And of course, it has poses, postures, and often preliminary visualizations and stuff. That's all Tantra, which the Semde has already said, we're not doing that. But this, remember I said you don't get the same level of luminosity. This is not because somehow the Semde is inferior, it's because these practice instructions were not present. They didn't remain in Tibet. They went south. They did go to Tibet, but they were lost in Tibet. So, but these practices have, and Dzogchen Semde made this very clear, same outcome. Okay? So when you do sky gazing practice, experiences of bindus, spheres, and rainbows, they all arise, these visions, Also, visitations of deities is a thing with this kind of practice. It's much more common than other forms of practice, even Tantra, believe it or not. So now, this is a really important point. These visions all arise from within the heart, and they're not about the eyes or any other senses. There's some deeper level teaching on that I'm not going to do, but just this point's important. It's not coming from the eyes. It's coming from the heart. Okay? Now, really important point. We're talking about vision, right? This does not mean that the practice has to be about the eye sense. For most humans, sight is the dominant sense, but that isn't true for everyone. So dwelling in the joy of sound and touch and any of the other senses can equally lead to these kinds of experiences or visions. Because I say it's not about the eyes, it's about the heart. It comes from the heart. So a person without sight can still have these visions, which we call visions, It's really display of emptiness, display of pure awareness, So any of the senses can lead to that, which is why the instruction says, joyfully delight in the uninterrupted vision of the objects of the six senses. So all of them. What we do in our practice is zoom in on one, because that helps us to settle. Okay. So again, just repeating, those visions are not of sight, but of the heart. So the first key point, which I ran through that little list of key points at the beginning, is joy is not just joy. So this is a interesting thing, and it's about the fact that these teachings come from a practitioner's perspective. They're not theoretical. And so often the analogies you find in the Dzogchen texts, they are coming from a theoretical kind of philosophical place. And they don't really hold up when you're coming from a practitioner's perspective. So the analogies we use coming from a practitioner's perspective are slightly different. And you may notice that. You might go, hang on a minute, Longchenpa said blah, and so-and-so said blah. And you might hear something slightly different. And it's because it's coming from the point of view of a realized practitioner. It's not philosophical, trying to explain it to people who are not realized. There's a difference in those things. All right, so now so joy's natural radiance is awareness or Rigpa. Joy's natural radiance is awareness or Rigpa itself. Great joy is natural awareness itself. Great joy and awareness, which Princess Barani calls Bodhi, are non-dual. They're non-dual. There's no separation. So oftentimes in Dzogchen, we talk about Rigpa, or the true nature of mind, or Buddha nature being like the sun, and what rises, so like joy, love, compassion, equanimity, skillful means, wisdom, those things are like its radiance or its rays, the sun's rays, right? That creates a separation between what is not separate. So in the Semde, that language is a little different. We're not saying that joy is the radiance of Rigpa. We're saying that joy and Rigpa are the same thing. They're the same. They're non-dual. Okay, so just as the sun and its radiance are non-dual, these things can't really be separated in any real way. Now, this is important. The greater our experience of joy, the greater our experience of the luminous state, because they're non-dual. This seems very simple to me. And for that to occur, for these things to be non-dual, our heart needs to be completely open, relaxed, and obviously full of joy's natural radiance. So it seems a little bit circular, and that's because reality or the truth is not logical. It often seems paradoxical, like it doesn't quite cogitate. It's because it is not logical. It does not cogitate. The conceptual mind cannot really get it. Okay, so the practice advice around this is simply look at or listen to your chosen object. I'll go over the practice later, like what I mean by your chosen object, with open ease, with the idea that there is nothing to gain or attain, nothing more to know or do, and nowhere to go. So that's kind of a paraphrase of what we call the 4 seals of Dzogchen Semde, which were given to Jamyang by Kyabje Togden Amtrun, and which we have not found anywhere else. So it seems to be something that is only transmitted verbally. So you see that phrase, the 4 seals of Dzogchen Semde, it's from Kyabje Togden Amtrun, not from anywhere else. So eventually, simply by having the senses open, which is one of the other lines of the Pith instruction, the great Bodhi joy will blaze more and more. It will take no effort on your part. This is really kind of crucial. It will become your natural state, your natural condition. This state of bliss joy will free you because, in fact, you are already free. So the more of this somatic embodied joy you experience, the more the mind settles and the non-dual blazes forth. I can't think of a way to say that in language that makes sense. The more joy, the more the natural state. It's a very simple relation. So now, in this day and age, I'm aware that it is quite hard to relax and it is quite hard to feel joy, given what's going on in the world. But it is essential to Dzogchen. It's absolutely essential. It has to be your priority to relax and experience joy. Joy is based on a foundation of relaxation. So that has to come first. So for those of you who are new to the practice, again, I'm going to go over the practice again. This is coming a little bit out of order, I suppose, but if you find it really difficult to relax in terms of doing the joy practice, which is just to choose an object that brings you joy, simply look at it and then abide in joy. There's not a lot of instructions here. If you find that a little bit difficult, you can take a comforting cup of tea or a cold drink outside with you and relax with your beverage of choice while looking at the sky or another object of joy. Primarily in the Semde, the joy object is the sky. There are many reasons for that, but it doesn't have to be the sky. It can be nighttime sky, daytime sky, it doesn't matter. But it also can be a tree, a flower, a pond, a river, the beach, the ocean. It can be anything that brings you that somatic experience of subtle, gentle, non-grasping joy. So you can, if you do find it sort of difficult to relax and to just look at something and feel joy, you can take a beverage out and you can then have something you're looking at that makes you feel joyful, and the experience of taste is something that you can connect with in terms of joy, if that makes any sense. It's like a second object to help kind of really get you there. All right, so the next key point, joy is not ordinary pleasure. Great joy or heart joy is very different from ordinary joy or pleasure. That which we call great joy in the lineage of direct experience, which is a Semde, goes by many names: bodhicitta, luminous awareness, they're all good, and the heart of awareness, to name but a few. And that great joy is also the heart of devotion. So there's many words that you'll find in the Semde teachings about joy. For example, in the All Creating King, which is a very important Semde text, the word used 99% of the time is bodhicitta. But they're referring to awareness and joy as one. They can't be separated out. This is the problem with translation, and it's a problem with this. There's a problem in the fact that these translations have been done by people who didn't have the practice lineage, didn't have the practice instructions. So the kind of heart of this, I suppose we might call the feeling tone of it, this joyful sense of it, is not translated over when the word in its original form has that meaning. Okay, so great joy is a joy that's felt in the heart, so not in the head. Great joy has the power to free us from ordinary dualistic mind. Why? It relaxes and calms the mind in the same way that shamatha meditation does. Eventually, one realizes that all of these inconceivable states of joy, love, compassion, and equanimity arise from the heart and nowhere outside of ourselves. They are our heart's nature, our true nature. The next key point, joy always wants to be shared. This is a sort of a way you can tell for yourself if you are in joy or in an ordinary state of pleasure. So joy is selfless, loving, and open-hearted, whereas pleasure is selfish and closed. Pleasure, we want to keep pleasure for ourselves, and it's clingy. We cling to it. Joy is open. There's complete openness and letting go of it. There's no desire to hang on to it, and it's contented. You don't want anything more, whereas with pleasure you will want more. So that's how you can tell yourself if you're wanting more of it, if you're sort of chasing it, if you don't want to share it with others, that's just ordinary pleasure. But if you feel a great compassion for beings and wish they had this experience, and it's very open and non-grasping, and you're content, you don't care if it comes or goes, and it will come and go. In time, it won't go. Even in the most difficult, desperate situations, joy will be there with you. It doesn't dissipate over time once practice starts to really settle in. Okay, so the next key point, joy is universal. All human beings, all animals, all beings who have Buddha nature experience joy. This kind of joy. They also experience pleasure, which is the problem. So like Dzogchen, joy is universal. It's not about a particular religion or race or species. It's universal. And we can see in a lot of cultures, through those cultures, art, music, dance, where they have attempted to express that joy and share it, So we can see over thousands of years, many cultures sort of wanting to share joy. It's a very universal thing. So the difference in terms of the Semde tradition and the practice of joy and ease is that it's taught in a Buddhist context, which gives you structure, anchor, and direction, and also it's potent. It works more effectively than anything else you might try. So the path makes it something that it's possible that we can accomplish ourselves, whereas other ways of trying to share it, the viewer or listener or whatever, they might have a fleeting experience of joy, but they can't then replicate that without that thing. They can't become autonomously joyful, if that makes sense. So now we're going to move on to the second line of Princess Barani's Pith instruction. Whatever you enjoy, Bodhi will blaze more and more. Remember I said Bodhi is another word for awareness, which in this tradition, synonymous with joy. Remember Manjushri Mitra said this, Princess Barani's put joy right up front and center. Manjushri Mitra said, our natural condition is, or Rigpa is synonymous, it's one with joy. Okay, so Bodhi, awareness, non-dual with joy, will blaze more and more, whatever you enjoy. So the only restraint on this is that this is a Buddhist teaching this. So it's presumed that you're abiding by the 5 precepts. It's just presumed that you are not breaking the 5 precepts. Okay, so but beyond that, whatever you enjoy, Bodhi will blaze more and more. So the next key point, joy is exponentially expanding in nature. So we begin with a single object, we choose an object, we look at it, listen to it, whatever, and then eventually joy will be found in all that one experiences. So it expands out to every experience of the senses. Everything one perceives gives rise to joy. It expands out like that. Even unpleasant things. It reminds me of this quote from Longchenpa. Because everything is illusory play of awareness, we might as well just laugh. Good stuff, bad stuff. It's all the illusory play of awareness. We might as well just laugh. So laughter, joy is the natural response to seeing things how they are. Okay. So eventually, everything one sees, hears, touches, tastes, smells, or perceives will give rise to joy. Everything. Meaning that in time, everything one sees, hears, touches, tastes, smells, or perceives will give rise to the natural condition, to abiding in Rigpa. Bodhi will blaze forth. So then our perception, right, which is a trap, has always been a trap, becomes a gateway to awakening without changing it, simply because we're resting in joy and because joy and the natural condition are the same, non-dual. So it opens a door through that perception. You don't need to renounce it, reject it, throw it out, be afraid of it, be attached to it. Just this open experience of it makes it a doorway to Rigpa. Ordinary experience doesn't have to be sanctified, rarefied, special, or highfalutin. Just ordinary experience becomes the gateway to abiding in Rigpa, recognizing and abiding in Rigpa. Okay, the third line, I think we're kind of getting now, there's a lot in this little Pith instruction. Third line, when one has obtained the power of supreme presence and become familiar with it, so that's where the line breaks. Fourth line is kind of like part of the third line. So just a few things here. Supreme presence is non-dual awareness. So that's another way, a Semde way of talking about Rigpa, non-dual awareness. So in the Semde, the word Rigpa hasn't become dominant yet. Whereas in the Menagde, the word Rigpa is really dominant. It's really kind of the catch-all word they use to describe awareness. And in some way, non-dual primordial awareness, in some way that's not perfect because it elides or hides this joyful aspect of it, which is there in the Semde, when there's these other words for it. Okay, so supreme presence is Rigpa, non-dual awareness. The practice for obtaining the power of supreme presence, which means, it simply means the practice you use to recognize Rigpa, is sky gazing and or devotion. I'll repeat again. In the Dzogchen Semde, there are only 2 practices, sky gazing and devotion. So becoming familiar is just about repetition. This is not fancy. Just doing the practice day after day. So doing your sky gazing practice or your joy practice, if it's not looking at the sky, if you're looking at a flower or a tree or a pond or the ocean, whatever it happens to be, just doing it every single day. It's about repetition. Now, this is really important. You don't have to know anything special to become familiar with non-dual awareness. So this is why in the 10 absences, which is a Pith or Dzogchen Semde teaching, it says there's no particular philosophical view you need to adopt. You don't need that stuff. You just need to open your senses to what you're experiencing and let it give rise to joy. So it's just about repetition, and then you don't have to know anything special to become familiar with non-dual awareness. And then confidence in the practice comes through direct experience of the practice. So in a way, I'm giving this a hard sell. I'm trying to convince you. Do this simple practice. It will liberate you, right? I am giving you a hard sell here. But in a way, the only way you can really be confident in the practice is to do it. And we've seen that in our little Sangha. People start out like, how can that work? That can't possibly work. That doesn't sound right. I've been taught all this other stuff. I've got to purify. We hear this all the time. There's a lack of confidence in this simplicity because of the noise from the other schools, which is drowning out this quiet, subtle, simple little tradition. And I can talk till I'm blue in the face about this and give you all of the, where the Buddha said this, where Prabhupada said that, Manjula Mitra said that, Princess Barani said this. But the confidence will only come if you do it, and persistently and consistently. So every day over a period of time. And I challenge anyone to do this practice consistently every day for like 3 months and not find a benefit. Like I don't think that's possible. I think that's impossible in my experience. But you need to address your unique little headspace around it. If whatever your little headspace is, or big headspace, in the case of big problems people have with relaxing and finding joy, those things need to be addressed separately from the practice. All right. So confidence comes through direct experience of the practice. It's the only way to be confident in this stuff. Given that, in time, you'll notice that a continuity of experience unfolds. As I said before, everything starts to give rise to joy and pushes you into the natural condition, or rather dissolves the delusion. The dualistic mind just dissolves and you're just in your natural condition through joy. So you experience open-hearted joy during practice, and that experience continues in post-meditation in everyday life. So sitting in traffic, on the bus, feeding the cat, taking the kids to school, in a very boring Zoom meeting at work, all joy, all joy. So it becomes a continuous stream of joy and being in the natural state. Okay. 4th line. Meditating means leaving the 6 sense consciousnesses free and relaxed. This is a really important point. So the Sutrayana approach is to renounce and reject sense objects. The Vajrayana approach is to manipulate, reinterpret, which is called transform, and make stories or narratives about sense objects. In Dzogchen Semde, we don't do any of that. We just leave the sense objects as they are. We're not transforming anything. We're not intervening. We're not renouncing. We're not rejecting. We're not cultivating. We're just leaving everything as it is. So we don't renounce, reject, or alter anything to do with the senses. Leave it all as it is. In the Tibetan Dzogchen teachings, this is known as chogshag. I tend to try and avoid using Tibetan words for things because Dzogchen is not from Tibet, and Tibetan has the Tibetan language. They didn't translate things over literally. They kind of translated things over poetically, which is fine, but it means sometimes that there's a little bit of a distance between what's meant and what the word says. But anyway, and also we're not Tibetan. Most of us are not Tibetan. Some of you may be, but most of us are not Tibetan. So there's no point in using all these Tibetan words. But anyway, that translates as leaving everything as it is. Just leave everything as it is. Don't intervene. Just leave it be. As with meditation, when we're learning meditation, the instruction is let everything come, but let everything go. And it will all dissolve by itself. Because it's why? It's empty. It's all void of inherent existence. It's all impermanent. It will all dissolve by itself without any intervention from us. So just leave everything as it is. Same with the senses. Like when we're walking down the street, and if we're a Sutrian practitioner and we see something that stimulates, we sort of go, oh. Or we see something that is frightening, we block it out. But Dzogchen is to just be open and unreactive. Just let it be as it is. It'll go by itself. There's no need to intervene. So eventually, that takes a long time, and the way to do that is to not train in leaving things as they are, but to just abide in joy. And eventually, we stop altering our experience because the joy quietens the mind, number one, and number two, pushes us into a natural condition so that we don't need to intervene. Everything sort of self-liberates through the joy. Okay, we stop making up stories about our experience as well. So in some traditions with sky gazing, they go, sky is Samantabhadra, and you're like, extending your awareness out to Samantabhadra. There's all this philosophical stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But for many people, that is something that's not achievable. It feels strained or forced, or what it is. It feels fabricated. Okay? So we're not doing anything like that. We're just looking. That's it. Okay? So we're letting go of all storytelling, and we are just there in the joy, free and relaxed. When we stop looking at everything through all of these lenses, like renunciation, transformation, etc., and simply experience exactly what is there and nothing more, we come to understand deeply in our hearts, rather than in the head, that everything is luminosity, and we then experience it as such. So this is a little tricky to explain. The only way to say this is your perception changes. Your eyesight, in a way, changes. You don't see solid things anymore. I remember the we don't really share our experiences because there's no real value in it. But I'll tell this little story anyway because it kind of shows something. So years ago, after Rigdzin Jamyang Tenphel, my teaching partner, I'd been practicing sky gazing. He's been doing sky gazing for decades, and been in retreat for the last 6.5 years, something like that. But years ago, he came in from outside doing his hours of sky gazing, and he said, I remember his face, it's very vivid. It was just lit up with joy and awe, wonder. He's like, he came and went, so nothing solid. Because his eyesight had changed, and he was no longer seeing solid objects. He was now seeing how things are, not finally how things are, but one tether to the delusion of a solid, real, fixed existence had been broken, and his eyesight just changed, and I was like, that is correct. Nothing is solid, so it's like your actual senses change. What you experience changes. It's not like you become some saintly figure who, is just drifting through the same very world, but all good and lovely or something, the world itself changes because your perception is changing and your dualistic mind, which is a fabrication and doesn't really exist, is dissolving. And what's true, your natural condition, what we call Buddha nature, is left. And that doesn't use the senses in the same way. So, I won't go too much detail about that. That's why you start seeing lights, rainbows, spheres, bindus. This is the radiance of awareness itself. Finally, you're perceiving it. It's always been there, But an interesting point is that's a step along the way. Oftentimes when we talk about these things, people think, oh, that's the ultimate realization, the four visions, rah-de-rah-de-rah. It's a step along the way, according to the Semde teachings. That itself, the bindus, the lights, the rainbows, that dissolves, and then there's just pure luminosity. What in the Bardo teachings we would call mother luminosity. All right, fourth line. Meditating means leaving the sixth sense consciousness free and relaxed. So we've gone over the first bit about we don't renounce, etc. And that we stop altering our experience and we're just there in the joy, free and relaxed. So we come to understand, I'm just going to repeat this, we come to understand deeply in our hearts that everything is luminosity and experience it as such. The thing about luminosity is colorless, shapeless. Now, we cannot conceive how to live in that world, how to live in that way, in a world in which everything is luminosity and solid shapes vanish. They're not, they were never really there. They're a delusion. And color, which is a delusion as well, goes, right? We can't comprehend from the position of delusion how we could function like that. But that's how the Buddhas function. That is their whole world. That is all there is. And then, of course, time and space are not there anymore either. You just can't get a head around this. All right, next key point. Joy is effortless. So this last verse, meditating means leaving the sixth sense consciousness free and relaxed, means that all you do is look. Just skygazing, you just look. All you do is listen. So if you've decided that you're going to listen to the wind or the sound of a stream or the sound of waves on the ocean or sound of, rain, thunderstorm, whatever, or tactile, like feeling the sun on one's skin or feeling the shade on one's skin or feeling the wind on one's skin, whatever you've chosen is your object of joy, right? You just look at it, listen to it. There's nothing more, okay? All you do is look, all you do is listen, all you do is taste, all you do is feel and rest in the joy these simple things evoke. At first, this joy is very, very subtle, perhaps even imperceptible, right? You might not really even feel anything much, but in time, you will. Trust me. I had a t-shirt when I was a kid. That's a very big aside. I had a t-shirt when I was a kid that I loved. I became a Buddhist when I was about 11. And I had this t-shirt at around that age. It was this big monster, big fangs and horns, and it was a purple t-shirt. I don't know. I found it in the bottom of a cupboard. I don't know even whose it was. Anyway, and it had this big monster, fangs and everything. And the caption was, "Trust me." And because I'd sort of just become a Buddhist, and I'd just sort of been learning about, samsara is an illusion, it's deceptive, you can't trust it. That t-shirt really spoke to me. And so I wore that t-shirt everywhere. And to the point where my mother and my sisters were like, please wear another shirt. I just wore it everywhere until it was threadbare and there was like I don't know what that's called, but plastic on the surface. It was all cracked and, I just love that because for me, as an 11-year-old, it was like samsara was this like monster that was saying, trust me. Anyway, that's an aside. Okay, the last verse. Meditating means leaving the sixth sense consciousness free and relaxed. All you do is look, all you do is listen, all you do is taste, all you do is feel and rest in the joy. There's no striving, no concentrating, no conceptualizing about what you are doing. So this idea of like, oh, the sky is Samantabhadra, or the sky is like space, I'm going to extend my awareness out of space, all this stuff. That's another way of doing it. That's not what we do. So we're just looking, just feeling, just hearing. That's it. Simply by having the senses open. So you're not grasping, you're not pushing anything away, you're not doing anything with it. You just have it all open. Eyes, ears, everything open. The great Bodhi joy will blaze more and more. So this is the key instruction. Just have your senses open. That's it. There's no need for like philosophy, purification, accumulation. None of that is required. And the other interesting thing, in the Semde, there's no preliminary practices. Zilch, zero. You go straight into doing sky gazing and devotion. Straight in, that's it. And of course it evolves over time, it changes. And also in the Semde, there's no practices beyond those ones. So there's no like higher practices. All of the other systems have like a gradated path. You do this, then you do this, then you do this. Semde is not like that at all. Straight up, you're doing sky gazing, or the joy practice is what we call it, and you're doing devotion, and that's it. You know, devotion for Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and if you're lucky, Guru. Okay, so, but really sky gazing and the joy practice is about having your senses open, and that's what this line means. Meditating means leaving the sixth sense consciousness free and relaxed. Okay, and once you have had a glimpse of Rigpa, recognized Rigpa, had some kind of experience of Rigpa, which comes quite quickly through the sky raising practice, and it's quite quickly, especially if you team it with devotion, then this practice is very, very much easy and fast-tracked. Very, very much becomes natural. Okay, so I will run a little over, but we're kind of right on time. So to conclude, what we call the joy practice or sky gazing gives rise to effortless joy, which ushers one into this effortless state of non-dual awareness, or Rigpa, the natural condition. It's important to understand that this Pith instruction has nothing to do with the intellect. This is a pure Semde teaching because it meets all of the 4 seals of the Dzogchen Semde, which I will share with you now. So this came from Dzogchen Semde directly to Rigdzin Jamyang Tenphel. We've done multiple searches to find this in Tibetan texts, Sanskrit texts, other texts, and we haven't been able to find it anywhere. So it seems to be unique to Dzogchen Semde. We've seen similar things, but not exactly like this. So these are the 4 seals of Dzogchen Semde from Dzogchen Semde. Number 1, there is nothing to do. Number 2, there is nothing to know. Number 3, there is nowhere to go. You don't need to go somewhere special. Number 4, there is nothing to gain or attain. Why? Our natural condition is already primordially perfect. Nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be subtracted. Okay, so simply rest, open your senses with the sky gazing, just look, and without effort or striving, just look and relax. Just listen and relax. Just feel and relax. It's very simple, very, very simple and powerful. So we're going to have a break in a minute, and after the break, I'll go through the practice very quickly because we don't have much time. But I just want to talk about this for a little bit. So in the Dzogchen Semde, the practice of sky gazing and the joy practice are part of a path that is also known as the path of direct seeing, or the path of luminosity, which contradicts what a lot of lamas will say, that there's no luminosity, there's no, etc. This means that practitioners may, from time to time, I think, will see or experience things outside in the realm of ordinary experience. That is completely normal. This is a positive sign, but not something we cling to. For as long as we continue to see colors, shapes, and form, there's a great teaching about this from a Dzogchen master. It's slipped my mind at the moment. But he basically said, if you're still seeing color, you're still seeing shape, still seeing form, it's still stained by samsara. So essentially, if you're still seeing color, you're still seeing shapes and form, Our experience continues to be stained by samsara. It remains a dualistic experience, somewhat. Even if you feel like this, like, thoughtless, lack of separation between what you are experiencing and yourself, if there's still color, shape, etc., then there's still a stain of samsara, of dualism there. So, but in the final accomplishment, what we call the great completion, or Dzogchen Sogpa, all will resolve into pure luminosity, the state of luminous awareness. That state, is free from the dualistic manifestations of color and form, self and other, time and space. All those things vanish. Color and form, self and other, time and space, they're gone. There's just luminous awareness. Okay, so we have a protocol, because this is what we teach and this is what's likely to happen. Sky gazing is more likely to give you bindus, seeing rainbows, etc., and also visitations from deities. Interestingly, we don't do deity practice, but people who practice sky gazing are more likely to have visitations from deities than any other kind of practice. I mean, it's a very strange thing. Anyway, so we don't cling to any of that. It's just the display of awareness. Let it come, let it go. It's no big deal. Everyone goes through it at some point. Some people have much less of it than others. That doesn't mean they're not as good practitioners or their practice is not going as well. These things are not signs of accomplishment at all. The only sign of accomplishment is you feel more joyful, you feel more loving, you feel more compassionate, you feel more content and relaxed. That's what we call the guiding lights of awareness. Those are the measures of practice, not you're having visions, you're being visited by deities, etc., etc. It's you're joyful, you are loving towards others and yourself, you are compassionate towards others and yourself more than you were. You are content or equanimous. You treat everybody fairly, and in yourself you are content and you're relaxed. In situations that used to really stress you out, you're more relaxed. So that's the guide of accomplishment, not visions and visitation with deities and stuff like that. That's all just passing. Because everything has to dissolve into luminosity, mother luminosity, in which these things aren't there. They arise from there, but they aren't there. That makes sense. They're also kind of non-dual. It's a little bit difficult to get our head around. So because this is likely, we have a protocol in our Sangha. When you start having these experiences of seeing lights, the edges of things start to pixelate or blur, you're seeing rainbows, things don't seem as solid as they were, you're seeing light in the middle of the night, stuff like that starts to happen. Our protocol is go to a optometrist. Why? So the first reason is because Rigdzin Jamyang Tenphel had a dream of the previous Karmapa in which he said, when this started happening in Jamyang years and years and years ago, he said, for your own peace of mind, and so that you know that this is about practice and not about your optical nerve, go to an optometrist. And so he went to an optometrist, got a full-on examination, took more than an hour and a half, and I was sitting in the waiting room, waiting. He had a full examination, like everything checked, and there was absolutely nothing wrong or different or odd about his optical nerve or his eyes or anything. So then he knew, because he'd had the dream and because he'd had this examination, it's about practice, right? Also, as a foundation that abides by the best practice of Australian law, it's part of our duty of care to people practicing with us that when this starts to happen, we do send them off to an optometrist to make sure that they're okay. It also gives you a little boost of confidence. Oh, it is practice, Now, your optometrist, if they're good, might say to you, you can go off to a neurologist if you want and check into this further. We're not recommending that, but if you want to, you can, Jamyang didn't. Okay, so if you're concerned It's just as if you're concerned about what you're seeing or experiencing in your practice, come to us and we'll probably say, this is okay, probably nothing to worry about. It's a sign of practice. Don't cling, no big deal, probably will pass eventually. But we will suggest you go to optometrist because that's part of our duty of care to you. Okay, so conclusion. At the end of the day, these are all just words. Without practicing, the Dzogchen Semde will be of no help to you. So everything I've said here, if you don't practice, what's the point, frankly? The confidence comes through the practice. It's gained through simple experience, nothing lofty or fancy, just through the simplicity of it, confidence is gained. And then obviously realization is gained through that simple practice. It's very simple practice undertaken with confidence. Confidence is important. But everything I've said is really just to try and get you to do the practice. Because if you don't do it, then the teachings don't help on their own. You have to practice. Okay, so we'll have a break now for 10 minutes and I'll come back and I'll run through the practice. Those of you who know me and are practicing in our little Sangha will know this. So just go very quick. It's very simple, so it doesn't take long. And then we'll do some longs and then a Q&A. All right, so I will pause the recording. Okay, so we're back from our break. So I'm just going to quickly go over the practice, how to do the joy practice or sky gazing essentially. So in our tradition, the way that Jamyang learnt this from Kyabje Chongden Amchen was it's a folded in version of sky gazing and devotion as one. Now, in this version, you're using the sky as the joy object. But if that isn't something that brings you joy, you can use something else. As I said, beach, flowers, stream, whatever. And this one folds devotion into it. Now, if you're uncomfortable with devotion, and I'm aware that a lot of people are these days because of things that have happened, I fully understand that, and you can leave that part out if you're uncomfortable with devotion. This form of devotion is very simple. I suppose if we're in our Sangha, and I would suggest that this is a valuable piece of advice. In our Sangha, we only do Guru Yoga for a realized being who's beyond, there's no question they're above board, which means you have to be sure, which means you've done your due diligence, you've checked. So in our Sangha, for example, the objects of devotion are Kyabje Togden Amdrin, Kyabje Dujram Rinpoche, Papa Zambadi, Yeshi Sogyal, Pravajra, Sri Singha, Princess Barani, Buddha himself, any realized being who is absolutely stainless in their conduct, in their ethical conduct. So, this is super important. So in our Sangha, that's the nature. That's who we recommend. Kyabje Togden Amtran, Kyabje Dujram Rinpoche. They're just above reproach, beyond any question of anything fishy. I've been very lucky in that my teachers, Kyabje Dujram Rinpoche, Kyabje Togden Amtran, Nakpa Kamalada Rinpoche, Chogyal Noga Rinpoche, Chetsama Tenzin Palmo, Tungse Namke Dawa Rinpoche are all just above reproach. Some of them are a little naughty, a little bit naughty, but nothing unethical. So I've been very lucky in that regard. So just a piece of advice, like it's important if you're going to practice devotion that it be for an awakened being. This is very important. It just won't work otherwise. That being said, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Okay, so this is how this practice goes. So if you're not going to choose the sky as your object, so you arouse joy by choosing an object that brings us simple, uncomplicated joy. It can be anything. All simple and uncomplicated is the key here. It can be anything. All that matters is that the thing we choose ignites joy, no matter how subtle. We then gently place our awareness on and calmly observe the object. So just look. We simply gently gaze at a flower, a tree, birds, a beautiful piece of art, the sky, or for those of you who have devotion to a guru, an awakened being, a picture of your Dharma teacher. It could be gazing relaxedly at a beautiful mountain, a slow-moving river, the ocean, or a wide blue sky. If we are more affected by sound than visuals, we can place our awareness on the sound of wind gently blowing through trees, of water flowing soothingly down a stream, or beautiful bird song. Once the joy rises, we place our awareness equally on the object and on the joy itself. So you kind of like everything, your sense, it's all open, you're not focusing in or concentrating. So your awareness, your attention, I suppose, is on both the object, like if you're looking at the sky, on the sky and on the feeling of joy that's arisen. And then once you have your awareness or attention on the feeling of joy, it will naturally grow. Now, I've said this so many times, it's not actually growing. What's happening is the dualistic mind is settling down, dissolving, and the joy seems to become greater, but it is actually already great joy. It's already great. It's already boundless, but we can't recognize that while the dualistic mind's kind of like clouding it out. So as the mind sort of settles through the joy, then it seems to get greater, but it's actually not growing at all. It's just the split between dualistic mind and natural condition is shifting towards natural condition, and the joy seems to be stronger. So then you just rest in that joy. Allow the joy to settle and calm the mind and body. Now, if you are doing devotion with it, you then call upon the Guru using the phrase, Lama, be with me now. So this is a very short, succinct, visualization-free, mantra-free, accumulation-free Guru Yoga. It's just Lama, be with me now. And I'm going to repeat, I always repeat this, the word Lama is not gendered. It doesn't mean a male person. It doesn't mean a female person. It means, well, actually, it's more female than male. It means a being, lofty being, lofty, penultimate, paramount, lofty, or replete with great qualities. Be with me now. Lama, and Ma is feminine. So be with me now. Lama, be with me now. So, and this is because it's a hint towards the mother luminosity, the feminine part, Lama. It's a hint towards the feminine quality of the mother luminosity, which is about space rather than what manifests inside space. So kindness, love, joy, compassion, equanimity. So you just say, Lama with me now. Allow sincere, heartfelt devotion to rise. And this is the thing. The devotion's already there. Your natural condition is already devoted to the Buddha. It's non-dual with devotion. So you're not really, that phrase allow is important. Allow it to arise. A lot of people block it, push it down. They don't want to feel overwhelmed. They want to cry. You don't want to cry, the number of times I've just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. Countless. You just have to let that happen if that's what's going to happen, if that's where devotion takes you. So now, if you want, you can visualize a guru in space in front of you. We predominantly, if you don't have a living guru, you can use the Buddha, you can use Shishisogi, but for us, we use Kyabje Dzogchen Amtran or Kyabje Dudra Rinpoche, right? But you can choose. We're not going to tell you what to do. And then you offer them your entire being unconditionally. and then dissolve them into your heart. So there are a lot of times there's these bindus go to the chakras. That's tantric. This is just straight, the guru straight to your heart, so straight into your heart, and you become one. And then rest at ease in stillness. So guru, heart, rest. And then with the joy and blessings of your guru mingling in your heart, resting, calm, abiding meditation without object or objective. So that means to just do a bit of shamatha after you've done the joy and you've done the guru yoga. Just rest in shamatha, which means what? To just sit in a kind of relaxed way, and if thoughts come, let them come, but then let them go again. You're not focusing on the thought in the sort of sutra way of doing shamatha, in this sort of Dzogchen way of doing it. You just let things come and go. Whatever comes, comes. Whatever goes, goes. If you do find yourself distracted, just really gently bring yourself back to being present. You can use the breath if you want as a support to help ground you in the now, in the moment. All right, and then you just abide in the state of open ease, limitless rest. So the little comments here that Jamyang has made, when we combine the elements of radiant joy, devotion to the guru, and resting in stillness, we have a practice that is one of the swiftest and most effective paths to realization. As one practices this daily, one will experience the relinquishing of all hopes and fears, identifications and fabrications, until all form-based practice drops away and one simply rests in a state of spacious awareness, alive with bodhicitta. At this point, all name and form, effort and striving are abandoned, and one abides in the deep experience that there is nothing to do, nothing to know, and nowhere to go. The experience of shamatha, vipassana, Dzogchen, and Togyo are accomplished naturally and effortlessly, and one then abides in the natural state. So as a little aside, many masters have pointed out that the realizations of Dzogchen and Togyo are achieved through devotion, simple devotion. You don't need to do all these other things. And also, a number of masters, particularly Togyo and Namkha Milgram, have pointed out that the outcome of sky gazing, of Semde-based practice, is the same as Dzogchen and Togyo. It's the same, without doing all these other things. Also, Honsdale Lama in his Dzogchen teachings in, I think, 1994 or something like that, he also pointed this out. He said, you don't need to do other meditations. There's just natural awareness, resting in that. No more need for any of these other things. He made that very clear. All right. So that's the practice.